as much as I think, you all seem to agree that Chet Holmgren should be the number one guy, Orlando's not going to go with the Tri-Towers. We have seen obviously plenty of teams go with the Twin Towers in the past. But yeah, so with that said, Bobby, I'll start with you. Is Oklahoma City then, if Holmgren is there at 2, are they looking at anybody else, or is it just Holmgren at that point?
I think it's just Holmgren right now at that point. I mean, even to the point where you're not even looking to move up to number one to take him, because at worst, you're going to get Jabari Smith staring at you if Orlando does take Chet Holmgren. It may be different than prior years where, you see someone that, you're picking 3 and you want to get the 1 and it's going to cost you a draft asset. I think Oklahoma City's sitting in a really good position. They're certainly a priority in their front court, based off with, you went Josh Giddey and then you have Gildress Alexander, Lou Dort, in your backcourt here. So I think the Thunder are staring right at Chet Holmgren. I don't think it should be much of a debate between him and a player like Paolo Banchero. So yeah, I mean, Oklahoma City can just kind of sit back and see what Orlando does.
Well, look, we talked for months about the big 3 of Holmgren, Smith, and Banchero as the top 3 choices. But Jonathan, what are the chances someone else goes at number 3, right? Like maybe a Jaden Ivey or even Murray in that situation. What do you expect there?
The teams that I talk to don't expect that to happen. I've been told that Houston has definitely looked at that possibility of drafting Jaden Ivey, pairing him with Jalen Green. It would probably be the most athletic backcourt in the NBA, just in terms of, your ability to get out in transition and beat guys off the dribble. I mean, like those 2 guys are as powerful changing gears as any players in the NBA right now. And there's a reason why Jaden Ivey draws comparisons to Russell Westbrook. But at this stage, it feels like Houston is very comfortable with Paolo at number 3. That's the overwhelming expectation that I've heard around the league, that he's the pick. They've said from day one, they're open for business. They're, open to exploring trade opportunities. But I actually think that Banchero is a great fit for their roster. Pairing with Jalen Green, just another really dynamic shot creator who gives you a huge weapon, pushing off the defensive glass, operating out of pick and roll. I mean, there's a good case to be made that Paolo is the most skilled offensive player in the draft. And I think you figure out later on what type of players to put alongside him, Jalen Green, later in terms of the defensive side of the floor spacing. I mean, those are going to be some of the questions that those 2 face. But I like Paolo at number 3. And I think that, he's going to be a guy that, is really strongly in consideration as rookie of the year, potentially, if he goes there to Houston.
Kevin, now, Jonathan kind of alluded to some of that there, but how much will fit matter when it comes to these top 3 guys?
Yeah, I mean, I think Holmgren is maybe the more conventionally most difficult because of the fact that he just doesn't project as that classic go-to guy for a top 3 pick. And I think OKC would be awesome in that regard because you've already got a lot of that shot creation from Shai Gilgeous-Alexander there. So that's not as big of a need for them as it is for Orlando. I really like the fit of Paolo to Houston, as Jonathan talked about. And I think the reason why is, sometimes it's very important for players to go to places where kind of their weaker tendencies are discouraged and their best tendencies are played up. I think about Jason Tatum going to Boston, where he wasn't necessarily allowed to just play a lot of ISO jab step like he was doing in college early in his career because of the fact that he had such good players around him. Now, it's not necessarily the talent in Houston, but it's kind of the analytics focus there that I think could be really important. Last year, according to Second Spectrum, Paolo took almost as many long 2s as he did 3s, and he shot 40% on those, which is pretty good. But you compare that to even with his subpar 3-point percentage, he had an effective field goal percentage of 51% from 3. So you push those shots back a couple of steps in the NBA, and I think all of a sudden he becomes a lot more efficient as a scorer.
Bobby, let me ask you this. Do you see maybe potentially some other teams trying to trade into the top 4? Do you think the Magic, Thunder, Rockets, or even the Kings will entertain offers in this scenario?
I think, when you look at teams outside of the 4 teams, I think certainly keep an eye on Washington, who's sitting at 10, where they are. Priority is a point guard. So do you move up? But what do you have to move up? That's the big thing. You already owe Oklahoma City a first, which was from Houston as part of that Westbrook for John Wall swap a couple years ago. Is it going to cost you some of maybe your former lottery picks that you chosen a year before. New York sitting at 11. They've got that Maverick pick that's next year, but that pick probably will be in the 20s here also. So you have some of your young picks. I think when you look at the top 4, the look on Sacramento's face the night of the lottery when they moved up to 4 to be in that position, to know that they potentially could have there's a big gap between picking at 4 and picking at 7. And they are in a kind of, it's hard to say they're in a win now mode without a win now team. So you kind of have to, I think you have to be careful as far as being cute with the draft, as far as moving up, but unless a team comes in at, Houston's at 3 and offers, a really solid 1 for Houston to move back to, let's say 5 or 6, it's hard for me to think that any one of those 4 teams are going to move out of that spot.
Jonathan, you mentioned that, you felt that Houston would take Banchero, even though they have said they're open for business. But I guess let's just say, for argument's sake, that they are open for business. What's the worst case scenario for Paolo?
I really just don't see him sliding past 3. I think if somebody does trade up, it's to get him. He's a guy that a lot of NBA teams still think is the number 1 player in this draft. It's not a consensus here that Chet or Jabari are 1. I think more people have that than not. But I do think that Paolo has a lot of fans. I mean, what he did in the NCAA tournament, leading his team to the Final Four, just putting Duke on his back, against some of the best defenses in college basketball. I mean, that Texas Tech game was one of the most impressive games any player has had all season long. And so to talk about a 6'10" guy who can play pick and roll, create his own shot, shoot off the dribble, and really find teammates off a live dribble too. I mean, there's not a more valuable skill to have in today's NBA than that. So I think if somebody moves up to 3, it's for Paolo.
Thanks for watching ESPN on YouTube. For live streaming sports and premium content, subscribe to ESPN+.